Let's imagine you go out to eat and you see this well-lit restaurant filled with customers. You go up to the doors and you see the menus and you like pretty much everything you see. There's all kinds of full course meals, there's some great desserts, there's some really good entrees. And then you decide to go in, and besides the customers, the only ones you see is the cook. You think it's a little bit odd that the cook is spending so much time on the floor and not actually cooking, but maybe it's the charm of the place. So you sit down amongst the others and look at the menu, and at some point the cook comes over and takes your order. But as you're choosing your meals, every time you try and choose a full course, he tells you that there's something missing. They don't have the right equipment to make the dessert, or they don't have the meat that you've selected, and so you just pick what looks best that has the most to it, and the order is filled, eventually comes out, and you're quite satisfied with what you had. Of course, there was a discount on it because not everything was there for today, but maybe next time you come, they'll have the meat. Might take a little bit longer for the equipment, but you're actually quite hopeful. The cook seems charming, the atmosphere is pretty good, and you really want to try that duck or the homemade ice cream or whatever other options there are on the menu. You will want to try it all. And so you come back the next day. No, still no meat, still no equipment. Okay, well, that's understandable. You can't restock every day. So you come back in a couple of weeks and then months. And somewhere within that year, you just stop coming because they're still missing the meat. They're still missing the equipment. And it's still only the cook who's talking to the customers, taking their orders, picking up their bills, and also cooking and cleaning. And you're wondering, if it's such a successful restaurant, why are there no waiters? Why is there no dish boy? Why is it still only the cook and sometimes his wife doing all the tasks in this restaurant? It would be much more efficient if there was a waiter to take the orders. That way the chef could focus on actually cooking. But no, still only the chef, and the customers seem to be dwindling. Now imagine there was this coming soon sign on the restaurant. You knew that it wasn't actually done, but it was so good and there were so many people there. You had to try it, and you enjoyed what you had. And you believed that your interest and support for this restaurant would help it get rid of that coming soon sign. And you'd see the entire menu, even the courses that had no sections that were done at all, that eventually it would be there, and you could invite your friends and say how great it is, and tell them this is a wonderful place to be, and you should totally join. Imagine it's this way for 6 years. And after 6 years, finally, the coming soon sign comes down. New customers can come in, and huge publicity goes out. And you remember there were all these other courses that were on the menu. You were excited for these other things to try, but it's gone. And some of your favorite parts are gone as well. And it's still only the cook, and it's still only his wife. So you wonder, why? Why was such a great idea left and unfinished? And this is how I felt when I was playing Cube World, and 6 years later, without any improvements, suddenly we hear an announcement, and suddenly it's released. Cube World is such a unique game. It's a game I could spend hundreds of hours in, and I probably already have, but this was in the alpha, and there's no tracking for the alpha. So in the latest release, I know I've only spent 10 hours. Apparently this is a full release. It's not a beta, it's not an alpha. It is the game as it is right now. Is it finished? I don't know. Was it released as one of this live service ideas where it continues to develop because there's renewed interest and people buying copies? It could be. Either way, this is what we have. And to understand the feelings of several older alpha players, I think we need to go back to 2013 and understand what led to this release 6 years later. In 2013, Cube World launched off the heels of the massively successful Minecraft. It would be another procedurally generated game that could span thousands of miles with natural cliffs and gorges to wonder at. It was beautiful for its time. A bit rough around its edges, but this was an alpha, and we hadn't learned to be wary of alphas that would promise the moon and want to deliver a new sun galaxy. This is where it goes wild. This is originally a one-man project. Then the dev's wife would hop on board and start helping him out. So we now have a team of 2 people working on a project of scale as great as Minecraft, if not greater. The alpha was released and the internet went wild. Servers crashed, the store and forum was overloaded, and questions about the future began rolling in. I had stayed out of this side of things. It's healthier to enjoy a product without getting into the thick of the fans. A few bug fixes came out the first month of alpha, and then nothing. Dead silence. The forums were shut down and the store was closed. No one could play Cube World if they hadn't already bought the game. The sales were stopped. Its future was uncertain. When I had heard the news, I believed it was simply that there were too many players and that the dev needed some time to organize new resources. It's pretty obvious that there was too much to do by just one person in a reasonable amount of time. New resources would mean that his project could get underway and reopen everything. I thought it was this way for a few months, then a year went by. Then I figured it was abandoned and I would never see the true vision of what Cube World could be. I was able to enjoy what it was for how much there was, but I had learned my lesson with this game. I promised never to buy into an alpha again. If there's no good record behind the developer, do not buy the early access. This has saved me countless disappointments, and it could have saved me the disappointment of Cube World. Now, if you've watched games and interesting concepts for long enough, you'd see this trend. A game is released in early access or beta, and it never actually finishes. Maybe if the dev runs out of money, they'll call what they have a release, but feature creep, inexperience, and too many promises make the project bloat and collapse under its own weight and glory. I don't know if this is exactly what happened with Cube World, but what seems to be certain is that along with the huge interest and influx of capital, there was no expansion of the team. It remained a 2-person project, and as such, progress was slow. The game was in an alpha, but it was not for player feedback. There were no more updates to test out, no new ideas shared, no more changes to address any player concerns. After the 2 bug fixes, the players received nothing. After a few years, there would be a few posts about the game. Apparently, there were some appearances in different game conferences, but honestly, what's important is that the development seemed stagnant, which it should be when there are only 2 people on a project of this scale. So, with a bit of the history, let's go ahead and fast forward to today. Cube World launched. There was a bit of news going around, but nothing groundbreaking, and I'm not sure if it ended up getting the viral appeal that it had the first time, but either way, it was no longer on the custom launcher itself. A decision was made to launch the new version onto Steam, probably due to server cost, maybe for more exposure. The exact reasons won't be known until someone is able to contact the developer themselves. In any case, this is what we have now. A game after 6 years of development that has kept its joy for exploration and added a couple more bells and harps. So, let's play ranged. This is better. I can kill and outplay things, and I can take a while, but I'll probably get something good once I kill this giant thing. If I can damage it. When does it take damage? Does it never take damage? Was that a complete waste of my time? Am I really supposed to kill rabbits and horses to get some basic gear? Oh my god! And that was my experience the first few times playing the game. Thanks, I hate it. But I wanted to stick with it. I wanted to report on the game and give my opinion, and to do so I had to play more than just 2 hours. I needed to see what's in this new version and what it had to offer. So I saw a friend was playing and I asked to join up. I loved playing together, and out of playing together, and this is when I found out the news that just broke me.
A few things that are kind of weird. Like, I think my weapon, like the way the weapons work in this game, is not good. Like, I picked up a really nice weapon and now it's worthless again.
How?
Well, turns out that your weapons are bound by area.
Kinda. I grabbed my weapon from the old area. I just can't use my glider here, apparently.
Wait, it's bound. How could that be even a?
It makes exploring kind of dumb because then you explore into a new area and then you suck again. It's like, okay,
And now I
that
have
makes
to
no
start all over
sense.
again.
There's some weird nonsense. I don't think there's anything else in this town for me to explore, but
Like, I haven't even seen a town.
this is
And-
my first town I've seen since.
And you're supposed to find an anvil to be able to do anything with the iron that you find, and... What? Why did I
Pretty much.
randomly get a buff? A rage buff. How can I look at my skills? Like, I can't even look at my skills, I think.
I don't know. I don't know how to know to do anything. There's a lot of weird nonsense for this. Honestly, I'm not complaining too much about the game personally. I have my complaints. So I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but
I'm just lost, is what it is.
Up until now, I hadn't paid much attention to the fact that the items I was picking up had a specific region labeled onto them. I was just trying to get something to drop for my class and having next to no luck. I thought calling a friend over would make it easier. I just tanked the monsters and let them deal the damage, but they had no damage to deal. They had no damage to deal because their gear turned gray when they arrived. Whatever they had done in the region 100,000 kilometers away was now meaningless in this new area, at least for when it came to items. I flipped the desk. What is the point of collecting items if the items have no worth? It's painful enough to spend so much time skirting around one-shot monsters, trying to find an area with something you can take on, and trying to defeat them without losing most of your health. On top of that, you'll have to do it all over again when you get to a different place? And apparently I had picked the worst class ever because I cannot do anything if my armor is not up to the same tier as the monsters. And once it is, nothing below the tier will be causing any damage. I'm taking 0 from every hit. Face tanking everything in existence, rendering the whole combat, what was initially a draw for many people in the alpha, completely moot. And okay, this is all looking at it from the perspective of a returning player. I should try and look at this game outside of any broken promises and undeveloped features, and just ask what is Cube World like to play as it is, without thinking of what it could be. As I shared before, the early level experience is excruciatingly slow. You're forced to explore not because you're wanting to get your bearings, but because you cannot take on anything around you most of the time. So you spend the first 45 minutes running away from things, hoping there will be some monsters that fight each other to leave their drops available for you to pick up. Then you get excited whenever there is an item that drops, frantically open your inventory, and remember that there's a lot of other classes in the game. I'll say one thing, it is much more realistic that fighting a certain class type drops that certain weapon, but if it means that you will never find your weapon or armor drop unless you happen to come across one of these NPCs with the same class as you, it just means that you're less likely to actually get anything for yourself. It's an interesting hunt nonetheless, but you still get nothing for it more than half the time. Honestly, we can talk about the combat now and get into the items. I've tried making a melee as a start. It's rough. There's rarely any space between attacks, and when there is, you can barely get a single attack in between before you have to dodge or run in circles again to get your stamina replenished. It's very repetitive since there's no new skills to learn or feints or jukes or any way to outsmart your opponents. It's the same from starter to maxed out, except you don't need to dodge as many hits once you have a full set of gear. The attack variations for the classes seem to be fast as the stealth class, although they have a two-handed weapon as well, so their variation is fast attacks or slow attack, and the effect of the right click does seem to be related to the weapon type. One of them does poison, one of them has a greater chance of knocking down, I think, but I can't tell it because it doesn't say it anywhere. And then there's the warrior. It's either quick as dual wielding, slow as a sword and shield, or even slower as a two-hander, to the point you can't even get a hit in between monster attacks. And if there are different effects, I can't tell what they are. There's a hammer, there's an axe, and there's a sword, and I don't know what the difference is. Ranged seems to feel a bit better developed. We have more distinct attack types and the skills are very obvious in effect. I personally liked the boomerang for how much combo it can build up, and it's fairly easy to keep hits going. Somehow it seems to be able to launch two at once, and I'm not sure if it's a bug or a feature because nowhere does it tell me how or when it can do this. Mages get completely different attack types based on the weapon they're using, but on top of that, each weapon can have different elements. So if you want to heal, you have to pray that you get a water type to drop, and that this water type is the weapon type that you enjoy playing. So doing some quick math, you will realize that you have a 1 in 15 chance to actually get the right weapon to drop for your class. And the class issue is also present for armors, because any class's armor can drop for any person. So you're picking up rogue and wizard armors even though you're a warrior. And this leads to some very questionable design choices, because when you're looking at items and what's going to make items interesting, you have a few options. 3 big options that you always need to consider would be how to make the items interesting for the player picking it up, how to make it interesting to choose between the item types, and how to make items that are not valuable for the person picking it up valuable for others. Any one of those 3 will make picking up a good item interesting. But in this game, if you look at the first one, because there's so many chances for the item to be useless to you, the person picking it up, it would be more likely that an item is for a class other than your own. And so there's no joy in picking it up because it's not yours. Okay, what about interesting item choices? Well, the items are straight upgrades. There's absolutely no reason to keep a lower tier item compared to a higher tier item. Choice between tiers is only based on what you play. A sword and shield player will always choose a sword and shield just because that's what they enjoy most. If there's an axe or a mace but they want to use a sword, they're going to continue to use the sword. There's no stats that can be added to the other 2 to make them question their choice of using the sword. And finally, because the map is so massive, it's unlikely you'll ever meet others who are in the same region as you are, and as such, trading has little to no value and would be difficult to do in the first place, unless you're partying with other players at that time specifically. There's no value in picking up items for other characters. So already you could see improvements to the itemization process. Remove the waste and focus on the improvements, on what is actually good for the player on a minute-to-minute basis. And I'll need to asterisk here, yes, there are items that can carry over to neighboring regions, but they're rare and unreliable to receive. Okay, so the vertical progression is not at all the goal of the game. It's about the horizontal progression. The relics are supposed to promote this. They are the one attribute that you can carry over to different regions. It's basically an alternate form of leveling. As I had said, I spent 9 hours playing on a character and I've yet to see a glimpse of one. I had to check with my friend Iona, and she notified me that there are actually several that can be found in one region. In her 20 hours, she had managed to find multiple. Good for her, but this time I was already beginning to question the point of it all. I didn't know what I was looking for, and I didn't know why I was looking for it. The townsfolk had stopped giving me quests, and I was spending the last hours just hunting down the lore, not because it's interesting, but just in the hopes that it would finally unlock something on the map where I could find one of these relics. After reaching 90% on one of the lore threads, I called it quits. The whole endeavor did not feel worth my time. I had fought in an arena, and the experience was more of attrition than skill, and the hunt for this relic seemed to be the same. Yes, eventually I might find the last fragment of lore to discover the hidden city. But would it be worth the 10 hours I spent searching? Would I honestly want to do this again and again? I closed the game and left at this point. Turning to my wife, sad and with no sense of pleasure from any of the experience. Had I felt that I failed, I never reached the end of my search? Maybe. But what felt worse was that I knew it would be for something that would seem insignificant. Even if it improved my speed on my pet, or the speed in a boat, or how high I could climb, all of these horizontal progression, all of these good and great at increasing your progression in the next region, I knew that it would feel useless when I have to collect those 3 movement items in each and every region all over again. That using a harp or going into the spirit realm to collect some random item wouldn't give anything interesting compared to how long and far I had to go to get the items needed to unlock the doors. I was wearing yellow gear. I go into the spirit realm. Oh, look, a chest. Wow, it's a green item. This is useless. 50 coins. I'm already at 1,000. There's nothing interesting here. What was the point of exploring and getting a reward if the reward was just meaningless? It wasn't like I was scaling some massive cliff. I just saw this point on the map and I was like, okay, well, I'll try looking here. Maybe there's more lore. Maybe I can find my relic here. Nope. Just a random chest with an uninteresting reward. There was nothing for me to do. Nothing to set my sights on. The tedium of the hunt and being able to identify the fluff that was added to create the procedural quest just left a sour taste in my mouth. What would be the point of having near infinite quests and fragments to find if they had no real story in them? In 10 hours, I could have completed a well-crafted, beautiful story. I could have read a book and felt some kind of emotion. Instead, I was reading randomly generated text on a meaningless tombstone. There's never gonna be any backstory to the person. No, backstory to the people who died there besides the blurb of text that's there. So why should I even care about this blurb of text? This is what caused another bout of sadness. Each region could have been crafted individually to create an interesting story and history. My mesmerization in front of procedural games was shattered long ago. It's something that can be good to set up a large amount of space and create a good basis to work with, but it will never give you anything as good as a level designed by a human with specific ideas and ways to approach the situation. And this is what forms my final opinion on the game. As it is, or could be, it missed its chance. It is now more alive in the world than when it was first out as an alpha. But that life is a lie that you will see repeated across several regions. The reliance on the procedurally generated everything created more repetition than it did uniqueness. This is something that was noticed in No Man's Sky at launch. This is something that has been remarked upon for Path of Exile's Blight tower defense issues. It feels like the only portion of the game that was worked on in these 6 years of development and silence was the exploration, while the items and combat lost more features. No, they just lost features. They didn't gain anything, they just lost features. Item customization is now nothing but flat upgrade to values, whereas before there were multiple types of upgrades that you would need to choose from: damage, speed, crit, anything. Customizing the look of your items is pointless when you will be losing the chance to use them outside your region. Also, again, you can only put iron on there. Before, you could actually have some color variation with the other gem types. So there's fewer customization options as well. The combat system, it needed a rework from the ground up, and the monsters and players still have the same attacks and attack patterns as they did 6 years ago. And it's dull, and it's not any rewarding, it's not any thought-provoking, it's just numbers versus numbers. In the end, this seems to have been the product of someone who is either too naive, stubborn, or inexperienced to realize how far outside of their scope a game of this scale actually was. What could have been loved and cherished and enjoyed for the past 6 years is in a state of just pointless existence to many. Though for all its faults, I still find myself with a desire to play it. I still want to load a character in it and do nothing. It's strange. I feel drawn to it the most when I want to be in a game but not actually do anything. And maybe that's the point. You have no ultimate goal to worry about. You have no need to build anything or craft anything. If you want to be in a world, you can be in the world and just not do anything. Sit on a cliffside and watch the sunbox set beneath the rendered distance? Maybe that's all it needs to be. Except you need to make sure that there's nothing that can kill you, and to make sure that they can't kill you, you'll need to murder rabbits and horses until you can kill more dangerous things and more dangerous enemies, until eventually nothing is a challenge and you begin to question your existence, your reason to be here, and the meaning of life and the value of your time in this world, questioning whether the broken promises were promises to begin with, or if they were just desires and